Yes, it is.
Okay, great.
Well done.
So thank you. So first of all, thank you, David, for going first. Thank you, Kelly, for the song, and thank you all of you for showing up in your Hollywood Squares windows. It's great to see you all. I don't know if this makes me an introvert or an extrovert, but it energizes me to see everyone there. On one side of the screen, we have the Torah scroll. That's the way people read what people read from in synagogue. On the other side, we have a marked up and formatted version of the same text by Cantor Linda Sue Sohn, which came out of the work that she actually did for her Master's of Jewish Education thesis. The left side is marked up so that it tells you exactly how to read it, all the cancellation marks, all of the vowels. And on the right side, what is there is, that is really hard to read. That is almost impossible to read. I have read this portion in synagogue and I still couldn't do it again without preparation. And we expect bar mitzvah kids to do it. Why do we do this? That sounds kind of crazy. Is there anything about this process that makes sense other than, as Tevye would say in Fiddler on the Roof, tradition? Especially now when so many traditions are falling by the wayside in these times. Now, let me be clear, we're in the business of tradition. That's what we're doing in religion. But we're not, I don't believe we're doing tradition just for tradition's sake. It's not like students should suffer through bar mitzvah prep because their parents and their grandparents did. That's not the type of Jewish education that I believe in. But given that Torah reading is something that is meaningful for a lot of people, then are we teaching it the best way that we can? So this led me to my research question, which is how are strategies used to train Torah readers in American synagogues consistent with what we know about the learning scientifically from the perspective of cognitive psychology? During my master's in Jewish education, I learned something about the recent cognitive psychology research on how brains learn, primarily from my course with Dr. Efrat First in human development. And the short answer to these questions are, in some ways, yes, they are consistent, but not on purpose. And not only can we do better, but we can make it more meaningful and give our students more useful skills in the process. I conducted a survey of educators working in the field, cantors and bar mitzvah tutors and other educators. I got 33 responses. Most of the people who responded were musicians of some sort or another. Most of them did not have an education degree, either a general or a Jewish education degree. Why is this interesting? Even teachers working in the field in general education aren't always up on the latest academic research. And so even more so, people without academic training in education who are working in the Jewish education field may not be up to date on the latest research on how brains learn this and we have a fairly difficult task for brains to learn here. But this is also one of the hardest obstacles. So let me name a problem that we have in the field. I do it my way because it's better. Why don't you do it my way? This was a quote I heard from a cantor who has published a number of resources on on training bar mitzvah students or in Torah trope. And everyone has their system that works, or many people have their system that works. It may be that works for them, and that's what we need. As someone who's new to the field, at least new on the professional education side of the field, just knowing that some system worked for someone with no evidence is not necessarily something I can use in order to decide how I'm going to teach. And also, I don't necessarily think it's best for the community just to say, it's working for me, so that's the best we can do. I think we want to make sure that we're doing something that is meaningful, providing meaningful experiences to Jews. So to look at what is going on, so this book, Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown, Henry Roediger, and Mark McDaniel. Roediger and McDaniel are Washington University psychology professors. And I was introduced to this book in Dr. First's class. And They list a number of strategies. I'm not going to read them all out now. I would encourage you, if you are a teacher, you need to read this book. If you are not a teacher and you just care about learning and how you learn, read this book. It's really a wonderful book. But we're going to see how a couple of these methods apply to some methods that are used for Torah reading. Okay, color coding. This is the one we're all going to get into an argument about. When I entered cantorial school, I had this idea of color coding where I expected that I would learn the secret method of color coding that made it easy to learn Torah reading. Instead, in my first cancellation class, I saw one of my fellow students who had a very established system of color coding really struggle to do the work. In my survey, 40% of us 40% of teachers rated having their students color code as important. On the other hand, I got a really insightful comment from actually another Master's of Jewish Education graduate who works with students with special learning needs, saying that color coding creates too large of a cognitive workload. I tend to agree with this. Learning a set of colors that aren't in the scroll or standard just gives students an extra thing to learn, and having extra things to learn in your brain while you're learning, that's the issue of the cognitive load. That's not really helpful. The good news, though, is that while 40% said that having students color code was important, 53% of respondents said that having a pre-color coded version of the Torah was not important. So teachers intuitively get it. Having students being able to recognize the trope phrases and actually do something with it, that is where the learning happens. Color coding, people like playing with highlighters. So color coding is a fun and convenient way to do this. But the actual educational process that's going on is something that is called elaboration, the process of giving new material meaning by expressing it in your own words and connecting it with what you already know. So the thinking about what you know, the mental processing of what you know, whether you're using highlighters or not, that is really where the learning happens, and that is the important message that's going on. Another thing I want to talk about is what I am coming to call scroll simulation. 44% of respondents to the survey said that looking at photos of the actual Torah scroll was important, but there's still room to do more. 68% of teachers, so most of them said that within a year of learning, almost everyone did bar mitzvah tutoring for about a year, they only expected students to be able to read without vowels in the last 2 months. I didn't get into a lot of details in this because it wasn't my initial research focus, but I think there's room to do more of that because a number of the cognitive strategies that we learn about from science come into play when we're looking at the what we call the unpointed text without the vowels and the marks. This includes retrieval practice, which is the most important thing, which is just trying to remember what you know after you've learned it once, or have some knowledge of it. Testing, simulation, the generation effect, that's where you're using your brain to try to fill in what is missing. Indesirable difficulty. Again, you can look up all these things in the book or talk to me afterwards. But what this means is that you are looking in the scroll, even when you don't feel ready to look in the scroll, even when you are getting it wrong, it helps you learn. As long as you're getting it wrong and getting corrective feedback, it helps you learn. And maybe it's not fun because you're getting it wrong and getting corrected, but it's still that actually, the science says that helps you learn. That's what we mean when we have an evidence-based method. We're not just going by our intuition or how something feels, we're going by scientific evidence in terms of what actually helps people learning. So I would suggest, and maybe this is even an idea for someone to research next year, try spending more time with the stam text, even when you don't feel ready for it. That's the calligraphy text or something that looks like it, and that could help with Torah, with helping people learn Torah reading more efficiently. So in conclusion, I think there's some good news here. I'm encouraged. First of all, the science says that the best way to learn are ways that create meaning. We are all about creating meaning. We're all about creating a meaningful Jewish experience. And so while we might be tempted to separate this technical performance skill of reading Torah that you don't understand from something, from the meaningful parts of learning about being Jewish, it's actually meaning and learning skills go together. So that's great news from the science. We're also teaching foundational skills. okay, so our students won't be able to read biblical Hebrew fluently, but we are teaching them a foundational skill in engaging with Torah study. Moreover, we're teaching them study skills, learning skills. We're teaching them how to learn. There's a stereotype that Jews value education, and we usually think that means doctors and lawyers as opposed to rabbis. But I mean, here it is. We are teaching our students how to learn, and I think that we can bring that science of learning to the front of how we teach. I think we can emphasize it, and I think that will help us fulfill our mission as religious educators.